Hello, this is Michael Tracy, and this video is going to look at what Mount Everest does to people. In particular, I'm going to examine Mark Sinnott's The Third Pole, Mystery, Obsession, and Death, and focus on what happens to people who become obsessed. This obsession is as old as climbing the mountain itself, with George Mallory being the prime example. In the 1922 expedition, which was the first to make an actual attempt on the summit, Mallory's final push, when the weather conditions did not allow for it, resulted in the deaths of 7 Sherpas. Deaths would fall squarely on Mallory's shoulders. And at exactly 2 years and 1 day later, Mallory would again lead a deadly climb up the mountain claiming both his life and that of his junior partner, Andrew Irvin, in what was likely the first case of summit fever. But beyond summit fever, the mountain has another pull, and that is to find the bodies of those 2 climbers. In 1999, a team of climbers set out to find a body which had been reported by the Chinese to be at 8,100 meters, a short distance from the Chinese 1975 Camp 6. With the rather precise location provided by the Chinese, Conrad Anker managed to locate the body exactly at the altitude the Chinese reported and directly below the ice axe location. In his book, The Lost Explorer, Conrad Anker reports they left camp a little after 10:30 a.m. on May 1st, 1999, getting to the search area about 11 a.m. And at 11:45 a.m., after just 45 minutes of searching, the radio call came in from Conrad Anker. "Last time I tried a boulder in hobnail boots, I fell off." That cryptic call signaled to the team that a body had been found. And just 4 hours and 15 minutes later, Mallory would be buried and the team on its way back to camp. And that is when the problems started. This is a description of what happened to the team once Mallory's body was found. I have fixed up the audio from the original, which is linked in the description.
We come home with these incredible photographs that everybody in the world wanted. It was on the cover of the New York Times, Newsweek, and Time magazine had a bidding war for the photograph taken by Dave Hahn, the first photograph that they did not show you. But in that bidding war, in the desire for people to possess what we had, these images, there was this incredible backlash, if you will, and the dissension in the team was so shocking and upsetting to me, the deceit and the cheating and the lies that took place, that it would probably make a great tell-all book, but I've made many enemies.
That is from a public talk Tom Pollard gave in 2017, and what he said about the 1999 expedition is very different from what he is saying today. For homework, you should listen to the first 35 minutes of that presentation where he talks about the 99 expedition, as I will cover it in more detail in the next video. For people new to the channel, in that video, Tom Pollard is vastly overstating his involvement in the find. Tom was not there on May 1st when the body was found, as he had a problem with his oxygen system and headed down the mountain. Tom would return to Mallory's grave on May 16th, dig him up, photograph his face, take his boots, watch, and underwear, and leave the body only partially buried. The expedition video, which you have probably seen on YouTube, shows the respectful committal service performed on May 1st, while leaving out the May 16th events, which left the body only partially buried. Tom goes on to describe the toll the 1999 expedition took on him personally.
Well, what happened was in that, it's okay in many respects, but I was so naive, so just willing to put all my trust and belief in this team effort, these people. And I came home devastated, disappointed, absolutely blown away, like so against everything that this stood for, that not only did I reject the idea of that team, but Everest at that time became the opposite of what that enlightened, holy grail was. I turned my back from Everest and I said, I'm never going back again. I literally cried myself to sleep over this, amazed that people could be so unkind and cheat and lie while looking right at your face.
So that was the 99 expedition, according to 2017 Tom Pollard. But did the same thing happen in 2019? That is what this video is looking at. For this video, which makes up part 2 of the series, I will again apply the Rashomon lens to analyze conflicting stories. For the 5 viewers who actually like the Rashomon reference, here I will analogize Mark Sinnott with the bandit, who exaggerates and embellishes to make himself look bigger and badder than he really is. And Tom Pollard will be the widow, who is demure, coy, and plays the victim when it is not clear whether she was the victim or not. And that leaves Jamie McGinnis as the samurai, but I will leave that to the viewers to figure out the analogy. This video will focus on the account of Mark Sinnott as told in the third poll. Other people have different versions of the events that took place, and as I was not there, I can only comment on what the participants have said, which is quite a bit. In the third poll, an expedition was formed around the idea that Tom Pollard had the top secret guaranteed to be accurate location of Andrew Irvin's body that he had received from Tom Holzell, best known for saying, "He can't not be there." Spoiler alert, he was not there. Never was. The team, backed by National Geographic, was able to secure a permit to fly a drone on the upper mountain, which would greatly increase the odds of finding something, provided there was low snow. And 2019 had low snow, probably the least snow in 10 years. So everything was set for another great find. The only problem is the team lacked strong enough climbers to do the job without Sherpas. I will take a little digression here because this video is about how the Sherpas were deceived into performing the work. A common retort is that the team had to deceive the Sherpas to get the job done. Rather than saving this to the end, I'll explain it here because the same issue will cover just about every other excuse provided by the 2019 Nat Geo team for the deception of the Sherpas. In 2019, there were two teams searching for Irvin: Jake Norton's team for the Discovery Channel and Mark Sinnott's team for National Geographic. Jake put together a dream team of climbers: Adrian Bollinger, Dave Borton, Sid Patterson, and of course Jake Norton himself. These guys were on the same mountain, the same side, the same time, searching for the exact same thing. They didn't deceive their Sherpas. However, Mark Sinnott states what the problem was for the Nat Geo team. After 2 grueling trips to the North Pole, I certainly had no illusions that we could climb the rest of the mountain without these guys' support. If they walked away, our expedition would be over. And looking at their actual climb, that was correct. Sinnott reported throwing up on a couple of occasions on his summit bid, and the cameraman passed out on the descent and had to be rescued by their Sherpa, the exact same Sherpa they deceived at base camp. Here's the account from Mark Sinnott. Matt is the name of the cameraman. Blackbot leapfrogged past Renan and me, grabbed Matt's empty bottle out of his pack and swapped it with his own. I realized then he didn't have any more spare bottles. Once he was back on the gas, Matt was able to pick up and carry on. Blackbot resumed his position of sweep and drove us on, seemingly unfazed by having given up his own oxygen. I will point out there is a difference in this account as to exactly what happened. Mark Sinnott reported that Lackpaw gave the cameraman one of his bottles, while in the Himalayan database it is reported that Jamie McGinnis was the one who gave up his. So who gave the cameraman their oxygen? The Sherpa or the samurai? I'll leave that one to the viewer. With that set up, the Nat Geo team isn't going anywhere without the Sherpas. However, at some point, the Sherpas find out that the team is planning to do a search for Irvin. The account in the third poll starts with Mark Sinnott, Jamie McGinnis, Renan Ozturk, and Tom Pollard briefing the Sherpas about what they are doing. This occurred sometime after the first summit push by other teams, as McGinnis is reported to have wanted to wager on how many people died during the first summit push. Thus, this is fairly late into the expedition. As they make their final plans, they have this meeting with the Sherpa. They introduce themselves, and Mark Sinnott goes into his climbing background for some unknown reason. Sinnott then turns to McGinnis and says, "Are we at a point where we can lay it all bare?" This is referring to telling the Sherpas their real plan to do the search. This is curious because just a few minutes later, Sinnott will be claiming he thought all the Sherpas were told already. In any case, McGinnis responds, "I have already." The group then proceeds to tell the Sherpas about the search. The account reads, "The moment these words came out of his mouth, pandemonium erupted. Lakpa, who up until this moment had been the perfect model of equanimity, began speaking crazy fast in Nepali. Nagati, the Sherpa who had led our puja, kept saying something over and over in his now raspy smoker's voice. The only 2 pieces of it I could make out were written rule and blacklist. Pimba Tenzing, a young Sherpa who typically didn't even respond when I said hello to him in camp, was the most outspoken of anyone. 'This is not Nepal,' he shouted in English. 'This is China.' In China, searches off route are prohibited, and while Western climbers might not care about being banned, the Sherpas rely on the ability to work in China for their livelihood." At this point, Sinnott shifted the blame to McGinnis. At this point, all eyes turned to Jamie. He had just told us he had shared the search plan with the leadership of Expedition Himalaya and the climbing Sherpas. Jamie and I had agreed before the expedition that our Sherpa team had to know exactly what they were signing up for, and yet here they were saying that they didn't. However, if Sinnott had insisted that the Sherpas knew what they were signing up for, why did he just ask McGinnis 2 minutes earlier, "Are we at a point where we can lay it all bare?" And you can see this is a common MO for Sinnott throughout this event. He says one thing to absolve himself of any blame, and then later says the exact opposite. At this point, McGinnis loses his voice. Now, people lose their voices all the time on Everest, and it doesn't appear that McGinnis was just making this up, but in any case, McGinnis walks away. The group breaks up, and a meeting of the Westerners takes place in the dining tent. McGinnis confirms he had told the Sherpas, but perhaps not Lakpa. However, the Sherpas are fairly tight, and if one knew about it, it is very likely the others would as well. So what are we going to do? Sinnott said. I'm worried that we're effing with their livelihood, said Jim. That's not right. But then Tom Pollard chimes in with the idea of the final deception. What if we were to go for the summit and then do the search on the way down? Tom had voiced exactly what I was thinking. On the way down, it's better, whispered Jamie. Holzell would have agreed. He always thought it was important to approach the search area from above so that the terrain would appear the same as it did to Zhujing back in 1960. Besides, if we left for the summit at the normal time, it would be dark on the way up. I'm worried about what's going to happen when Mark has his Sherpa next to him on the descent and then clips from the rope and starts descending into the search zone, said Renan. If that's the plan, I'll be super careful, I said. Then I added, is this between us? Everybody knew what I meant. Let's do it like that, said Jamie. So there you have it. The three of them agree on the plan, and they all decide to keep it a secret from the Sherpa. And of course, they don't exactly do the search the same as Zhujing. Instead, Sinnott will end up approaching from the opposite direction as Zhujing climbed in 1960. And this is another common MO, stating something that sounds good to the general public, but anyone familiar with routes on Everest would know it is completely the opposite. They then go back and sell the deception to the Sherpa, and this is where their primary MO is used. They push Renan out in front as he has credibility with the Sherpas as he speaks Nepali. Then the rest of them all chime in agreement, making it out like they all agree with the Sherpas' demands while never explicitly denying that they have a secret plan. They also isolate the one Sherpa, Lakpa, and they first sell him on their deception. The book does not describe how the remainder of the Sherpa were told. Nothing they say is an outright lie. It is all the truth, but the truth from a certain point of view, and one that many reasonable people would consider to be a deception. We called Lakpa into the dining tent to tell him the new plan. Renan took the lead, speaking to Lakpa in Nepali, and then saying the same thing in English so we could follow along. We're going to follow the most simple plan possible, he said. Going to the summit, following the rules, filming along the way. We want to work with your guys and not create any problems for the government or your future climbs, so we're going to go for the summit, come down safe. What do you think? Chick-chock. And they did agree to go to the summit, following the rules. They never said they would follow the rules on the descent. Then Tom Pollard chimes in. We thought by not talking about our plan, we were actually protecting you guys. We didn't want to get anybody in trouble with the CTMA. But Mark Sinnott had insisted they tell the Sherpa from the beginning, right? And Jamie had told all the Sherpas except perhaps Lakpa, right? And this is a common MO for Tom, placating people with statements that sound good, but don't make any sense if you actually stop and think about it. Sherpa made it clear that them going off-route would get them in trouble with the CTMA, and the entire dispute is that the Sherpas do not want to risk getting in trouble with any off-route searching. That is the whole, this is not Nepal, this is China, and written rule, and blacklisting. Sinnott then concludes from all of this that Lakpa had tacitly agreed to the plan because he had not asked any tough questions. No one had mentioned the possibility that I might go rogue on the descent. Lakpa, for his part, hadn't asked any tough questions, and it seemed like what had been left unsaid was that we had found a reasonable compromise, and if there was ever a time it was better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission, this was certainly it. I'll have a poll in the community section as to whether you think there was a reasonable compromise that was reached. But for now, let's walk through how the deception unfolded. The main Sherpa complaining was Lakpa, who was the lead climbing Sherpa. They go to the summit, following the rules. On the descent, there is a problem. Matt, the cameraman, passes out. Lakpa has to give him his oxygen bottle, and they continue on. When they get to the exit cracks, Sinnott decides to go off rope. At this point in time, the cameraman had already been rescued by Lakpa and was using Lakpa's oxygen so he could keep the camera rolling. Then when Lakpa is about 30 feet away, Sinnott decides to go off route. Lakpa immediately yells, "No, no, no." Curiously, Sinnott does not remind him of their tacit agreement. Instead, he says, "I just need to go right there," and he points to the Hosel spot. But Sinnott is not going to just go right there. Instead, he's going to go there, and then he's going to go all the way over here while leaving the rest of the team waiting. This is one of the few publicly released drone photos, and I claim fair use for it. It isn't zoomed in enough to make much out, but because the drone is flying out over the face, the perspective and angles from the ISAC location are more accurate. This is where the party stopped. Sinnott unclipped. Lakpa yelled, "No, no, no," and Sinnott responded to pointing that he was going to the Hosel slot, which is here. And this is where Sinnott actually went, and the spot I had marked in the 2017 video about the final resting place. Exactly what Sinnott found on his search is a mystery, as no photos have been released. But that is the same area McGinnis went to in 2012, right after allegedly being told Irvin was not on the mountain. I now want to turn to the notion that Sherpa insisted that they go to the summit because they needed it for their climbing resumes. Sinnott offers this as an excuse in the section about the meeting where they deceive the Sherpas. But later, when they are climbing the day before their summit bid, they encountered heavy winds and clouds, and what they refer to as a blizzard when they are in Camp 5. The Sherpa are all going to turn around, and this is on May 29th, so it is too late in the season to come back later. In any case, during this blizzard, Sinnott has an idea. He calls another member of the expedition who is climbing about 500 feet higher, who has just ignored any notion of turning around, and he asks that person how the weather is, directly from Sinnott's book. "It's sunny up here, and there's no wind," Campanaro lied. "We're above the blizzard you guys are in. For us, it's safer and easier at this point to carry on. Over and out." Campanaro handed the radio back to Gamba, who then turned it off. And the reason Sinnott accused Campanaro of lying is because Campanaro said something that was not true. Of course, the Sherpas have radios, and they all heard the statement. Then Sinnott describes how they could change their plan and just go do a search at the Hosel slot. Sinnott states there were 34 oxygen bottles already in high camp. With that many bottles in high camp, there was no longer any need for the Sherpas if they were just going to do a search. But at this point, summit fever was just too much. Rather than just let the Sherpas turn around, like the Sherpas wanted to, McGinnis convinces them to push on. So there was no overwhelming pressures from the Sherpa to go to the summit. A perfect opportunity arose that would have afforded them the ability to let the Sherpas return, and that they could go conduct their search with 34 oxygen bottles stashed in high camp. But the summit fever had taken over, so they decided to press on with their original deception. Ultimately, the winds and clouds that they had termed a blizzard just blew over in the afternoon, and the entire summit ridge became visible. Sinnott noted it was remarkably reminiscent of what had happened to Odell. Sinnott noted how the 3 steps stood out and claims to have taken several photos from the exact vantage point of Odell. Not a single one of those photos has been released. And this is another common MO. Although both the Bandit and the Widow are professional photographers, for key items such as what the mountain looked like from Odell's vantage point, the zigzag route, and anything below the ice axe location, they always tell us what they saw rather than simply showing a picture and allowing you to make up your own mind. More problematic is that this is a still from the Ghost Above, which shows the time just when the clouds are breaking, and the first step is not visible at that location. And this is another MO. Sinnott would certainly know from climbing in that area that the first step is not always visible. But rather than telling the readers this rather important fact and then presenting his own photos showing it is visible, he just cursorily states he could see all 3 steps and thinks that somehow he would have been able to see climbers scaling any of them when there is no way to see climbers dressed in drab climbing on dark rock at that distance. Equally curious was that Sinnott did not seem remotely concerned about leaving the 34 bottles in high camp if they turned around. Better to just make videos about people leaving their trash on the mountain rather than worrying about carrying your own stuff down. McGinnis only brought up 6 Sherpas, so for 34 bottles that need to be brought down, that is 6 bottles for 4 of the Sherpas and 5 for the other 2. And while that is a bloody load, they also need to carry down all the equipment, tents, sleeping bags, etc. from all the camps, and all after having to escort the Westerners to the summit. Did they really carry down all their trash? I'll leave that question for the viewers. Sinnott never apologizes for what they did, and all the Sherpas except for Lakpa are edited out of the Summit Day video that makes up the Ghost Above. The only reference is in a footnote where Sinnott writes, "When we got back to Kathmandu at the end of the expedition, Lakpa Tenzing Sherpa came to my hotel for a long interview and debrief of the expedition. He said he had already forgiven me for my indiscretion in the yellow band. His comment was essentially, no harm, no foul. We parted as friends." But had he told Lakpa that it was not an indiscretion? It was the plan all along? Somehow I doubt that. In any case, according to the Himalayan database, Blackbaugh has not been on a single expedition since then. And this brings us back to the beginning with the clips from Tom Pollard. At first, it's difficult to believe that a group of climbers would be so full of deception as Tom describes the 1999 team being. However, looking at the 2019 team and how they completely deceived the Sherpas, and yet when they had the perfect opportunity to let the Sherpas turn around and just continue on with their search, which would not have put anybody in jeopardy and would have achieved their primary goal of actually searching for Andrew Irvin, they completely abandoned that. They go on with the deception and proceed to the summit, showing that they are no different. And who would have guessed that I end up actually agreeing with Tom Pollard?
It was so shocking and upsetting to me, the deceit and the cheating and the lies that took place. And